Hey everybody, it's Aluna Michaels, esoteric astrologer, coming at you to talk about the events of October 2018. And okay, so the big news of the month is Venus turning retrograde. Yay. Not as harrowing as the Mars retrograde we just went through. In fact, maybe not harrowing at all. Because Mars is a big problem. Well, it's not a big problem, but Mars's definition is going forward. So Mars going backwards is like, oh gosh, and in a lot of ways, Mercury is about like the new thing and the moving ahead, and it doesn't like to go backwards either. Other planets, like Venus is so sort of easygoing in general and reflective and internal in some ways and embracing that the retrograde isn't necessarily so distraught laden. The planet itself did go retrograde on the 5th of October. I'm doing this on the 7th. Sorry, I'm a little late this month. And Venus will be retrograde until November 15th. It's retrograding, if you like to know, 10 degrees of Scorpio, going back to 25 degrees of Libra. Some of you like to know, when was it 25 degrees of Libra before it went retrograde? That was September 3rd. So it was almost a month of that sort of shadow window kind of pre-retrograde thing. Now, Venus goes retrograde like every year and a half, and it has an interesting pattern that right now it's retrograding in Scorpio, and 8 years ago, it retrograded roughly around the same place. So it moves really slowly in these patterns. When it does retrograde every 8 years, it'll repeat a pattern and then move slightly off that pattern, so it does progress eventually away from that same point. But if you think about 8 years ago, Venus-related ideas, relationships, partnerships, self-love, like your value system, and how you stick with your value system when you're around others is a very Venus idea. Money and savings versus enjoying yourself is kind of that Venus thing. Sometimes it can be about body image or eating habits because of that idea of comfort versus what's really kind to yourself is a Venus theme. Because Venus is retrograding in Scorpio, it can definitely be about financial planning type things, about subtle ways that you hurt yourself, because Scorpio can be about hidden resentment. So how do you, like, say if you have a problem with somebody and you're afraid to speak up to them, and then how does that come back on you? Do you overeat or, whatever you might do that's somewhat subconscious sabotage to yourself, and to your happiness? Or how do you create issues in relationships so that there's a push away or resentment or fear of intimacy can be reflected in any Venus retrograde, but especially with Scorpio, because Scorpio is so much about like the wanting to merge and the terror of being alone, or the wanting to be alone but really craving the together, and all those sort of Scorpio themes that can come up for review. So you also want to look at where Venus is retrograding in your chart. If you know your house placements, what house is it retrograding in? That can give you some insights too about the theme for you. But it really is about looking back 8 years and seeing how have you come from in your relationships and in your self-care and in your financial goals and things like that, and look at where you trip yourself up and how you could courageously create, overcome that habit, because that Scorpio is definitely about confronting the dark side of you and going past it, or admitting. Scorpio can also be about shame. So being able to admit to people, I do this in relationships, I sabotage relationships, I sabotage my finances, I sabotage my own joy. So where are you doing that? And how to heal that. But there's a lot of hope with Venus. Venus is so caring and wants to say, not like picking at yourself, why do I do that? But, oh, no, don't do that, little self. Don't do that to yourself. You're sort of embracing yourself back to yourself, And so there can be a lot of relationship healing with the Venus retrograde. Relationships that start under Venus retrograde can be very deep and very healing. Even if it's not a lifetime kind of thing, it can create a lot of healing. And especially this idea of how we are, even if we're in a relationship, we're alone somehow within ourselves, within that relationship, and kind of making peace with that idea that no matter how close we are, we're still at some point within ourselves, and not needing that person to fill the empty spaces, what we can be present to another person and help them and inspire them and heal them, and they, for us, give healing capacity or components that help heal, but we're ultimately doing the healing ourselves and not feeling so vastly alone within ourselves as we're connected to others. So that Venus retrograde can make a lot of progress about meeting people that help with that balance, or even seeing that in a long-term partnership too. So, so yeah, looking at the 8-year theme. So that would be 2010, seeing where you've been from there. Okay, so there's a Venus retrograde. Another component that's intriguing is, let's talk about Mercury. This isn't such a big deal. Once a year, Mercury goes through Scorpio, as it does any sign. Kind of like, you know, Mercury basically stays in a sign for about a month, unless it's retrograding. So we have Mercury going into Scorpio, and it's going to do a lot of interesting things while it moves through the sign. So it goes into Scorpio on the 9th, and it squares, it's going to square Mars, let's see, pretty much right away. When would that be? Like the 12th or so. And then it's going to trine Neptune and conjunct Jupiter. So what's interesting about that is Mercury square Mars. So Mercury in Scorpio itself can be, again, about this idea of the depths and facing the truth in yourself, or speaking the truth to others, or daring to, you know, tell your truth and believe you can overcome things in yourself and achieve things, and especially within your own mind, like the obstacles within your own mind that don't allow magic to happen in your life or something. So that Scorpio Mercury can be that overcoming of the thoughts. So the square to Mars, which again, I wasn't too good at saying that, that's going to be, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong date with that. It is the, let's say the 16th is the Mars square. I was thinking that of Mars going direct at a certain point. I keep forgetting Mars is moving ahead now. So let's say Mercury squaring Mars around the 16th or so of October can be a time when you see what needs to be confronted, what that block is in yourself, or, you know, within others, the way you're relating to others, that sort of like that little thorn or something. And then we get to the trine, like within that square, like a day later, we've got the trine to Neptune, which is a sense of forgiveness or a sense of grace, that when you come upon, there's a thing that happens, even if it's a small incident that happens, it could be kind of a microcosm of a whole pattern that you're working to overcome. And to recognize it as an obstacle to be overcome, but the Neptune is that contained within it is that way to overcome it, and to gracefully have this aha moment, or the compassion for the struggle. And so it's kind of like that. They say that the Japanese character for crisis is also the same one for opportunity. Don't quote me on all that, but there's something, it's a Japanese or Chinese character, and a lot of people say that, you know, within the crisis is the opportunity, which is sort of that feeling of the way Mercury and Mars and Neptune work in the middle of the month. But this idea that the opportunity comes from having the compassion for yourself for the crisis or the struggle, or the doing it over and over again, having compassion. And then by the time we get to Jupiter conjuncting the Mercury at the end of the month, like the 29th or 30th, the Jupiter can be that resolution for that mental struggle, or to be able to tear your thoughts away from something. If you constantly go toward the bad thought, the negative thought, it's like Jupiter makes it's becoming easier from the Neptune to the Jupiter to stay on the new track, and to say, yeah, like even if I make a mistake, I go back to here. Now it's easier to go back to here, to the positive track, and to see that you did overcome some major hurdle in yourself. So that is very interesting with the Mercury. Now, the full moon this month is really intriguing too, going back to the idea of the Venus retrograde. So when we have the full moon, that's always when the sun opposes the moon. So the sun would be at this point in Scorpio, and the moon would be in Taurus. So you can take some water here. So when we have a full moon, Venus will have retrograded back to be with the sun, and then the moon is going to be right near Uranus when that happens. So this is all intriguing because, sun and moon, of course, the full moon kind of inflates things or brings the emotions, to the surface and everything, as we know. So even just let's take the moon Uranus. Uranus is so edgy and electric, and and the moon likes to be stable. Moon, it's stable within its movement. Of course, it moves and it's full and it's new and it does this dance, but it does the same dance. It's like this little path, and I like my little rhythm. And Uranus is like, so when Uranus passes the moon, of course, it's going to happen, once a month anyway. But the fact it's happening at a full moon is more, so people can feel, and this happens on the 24th, by the way. There can be a sense of revelation with that Uranus can, aha moment to the moon, like, oh, I always do this, or I catch myself, because weaving into also the idea of this Mercury kind of self-discovery stuff and the compassion around that, there can be this other sort of pop of time with the full moon where you can say, that's where I do that, or look at, there's an example for me. And that could be a great way to look at that full moon. There's an example when I go off, or I notice this pattern with other people and they're doing this, and even have compassion for the other person or groups of people or whatever you're encountering that have this quirk that triggers you, and say like, wow, we're all have our quirks and we're all being triggered. And things like this can be part of that moon next to Uranus at the full moon. And then we go back to the sun, with a little Venus retrograde sitting with the sun, giving that sense of, like, kind of over the whole thing. It takes, the full moon kind of tones it down, takes the Uranus, kind of tones it down, and says, okay, we're looking at this with self-love. We're seeing it as, another example of how I can free myself from whatever, and then there's hope, that we can overcome these patterns. And I was just talking to a client, and I had read this book that was about something not related to astrology. It was actually about a chronic pain book, and it was talking about how our thinking can fire these pain pathways in our physical body, like if you'd hurt your back. And then the pain pathway could fire in your back, even though your back is healed, like if you feel sad or scared or overwhelmed. Instead of feeling an emotional pain, the body can refire a nerve pain. And in the book, the author was saying that one woman who had this chronic pain thing, she created a mantra for herself, which was, and she lived happily ever after. So this idea that even in turmoil, the end result was joy and peace, and if she could see the end of the story, she was going to be okay. And that book, by the way, is called The Great Pain Deception, and it's by Stephen Ozanich. If you have any chronic pain conditions or whatever, it's a fabulous book. But I think that idea of emotional pain too, about, and you lived happily ever after, that the Venus retrograde is sort of coming in and saying that to the whole full moon and the whole pattern you're working with, of like, what if it was all going to be okay? You knew you could overcome it. You had the inner resources. It was all going to be all right. And not that you blow it off, but that there's like a wisdom from the future that it worked out okay, sort of overlaying it, soothing your mind, helping you break through and not feel so mad at that other person or mad at yourself, So that even we could say that whole Venus retrograde is, he lived happily ever after, she lived happily ever after, and thinking that there's this graceful peace over all of the drama later, whatever we're going through. So there's that way to navigate those sorts of things. And being in gratitude too is an amazing, of course, thing in general, but with the Mercury Jupiter, we'll talk a lot more about gratitude next month, because Jupiter will be going into its own sign of Sagittarius in November, and that's always a big deal once every 12 years. But just that Venus retrograde about noticing what you normally overlook, the beauty, the kindness within yourself, the sweetness of somebody else. And maybe even, just as a last thing to say with the Venus retrograde, if you're in a long-term relationship, or even if like with your family, your mom or your children, or somebody, friend you had a beef with or something, to look at what are the things you love about that person. The sweet times you've had, the nice things they've done for you, things that were funny you did together, or lovely things, and really focusing on the beautiful things, Venus, that you forgot, retrograde. You're going back to look at those things, and or just noticing the beauty around you. That can be a great thing for Venus retrograde as well, and see how that nurtures you and fills you and gives you courage to do new things in your life or overcome current stuff. So, that is the story for October 2018. If you want to get in touch with me, it's alunamichaels.com, or my cell phone is 248 583-1663. And you can always get a private session with me, or contact me through the YouTube or email or whatnot. And I will see you next month, and goodbye for now.